Do that at 11, dear. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is the first Sunday of December 2019. And we are here as the guests of the Institute of Spirituality and Health. So, it's the month of December. All eyes are on Christmas. And I think it's wonderful that we can all rejoice and celebrate a holiday and a faith that celebrates love. It is probably always the case that the world needs as much love as it can get and as much love as we can give. And so any religion that extols love in any size, shape, or form is something I think we can all rejoice in and support. And as people are celebrating Christmas with family or friends or nationally, we take happiness and joy sympathetically in what's going on. It's a good thing. So how to tie all this into Buddhism? So it's kind of interesting. There are teachings in Buddhism, really the core teachings are that it's on the basis of our not seeing things clearly or as they are that we have reaction patterns, and eventually those reaction patterns, because of not seeing things clearly, not seeing things as they are, lead to forms of suffering. So not seeing things clearly brings a certain kind of difficulty. And how does that relate to the holidays? Well, I think it's very, very important that the holidays provide a very, very interesting opportunity for time travel. We all have, of course, conscious recollections of past holidays. And it's nothing to complain about, but we all, when we think about the holidays and or engage in the holidays, we have hopes and fears. And the hopes are either for replay of the past or for a repair of the past. And the fears are similarly of replays of the past and maybe fears of disappointment. And I'm assuming most of you are wired like I am, and that is when we have these celebratory, repetitive occasions in our lives, there are triggering events where we either remember the past or we see people from our past, or we even see people from our present who do things that resemble people from our past. And we time travel. It may not be very, very strong. It may be very, very subtle in a way, but I had an incident in my own life recently where I happened to be attending a religious service which triggered certain kinds of memories and associations, and then I was talking with someone and somehow just the way they looked at me somehow triggered some things, and all of a sudden I was 11 years old for a whole day. It's kind of interesting. And it wasn't that I wasn't living in Houston at my actual age. It was just that emotionally there was something going on that was very reminiscent in my body and my emotions of stuff that I was experiencing when I was 11. I time traveled. You know, we all probably have our own examples, but I know that there was an occasion when I was probably about 8 or 9, and we were doing a holiday celebration, and there was a particular song we were singing, and I was singing it my way, and my sister had learned in school to sing it the right way. And of course we had war, and she's older than I am and very strong-willed, and she overruled me and the rest of the family. And I was very, very upset. So, if holidays come around for me, there's always perhaps a little twinge of, oh, here comes that song, and is somebody going to correct me, or am I going to see my sister, and am I going to have some feelings about the fact that she corrected me decades ago? You all have, I'm sure, your own instances of things that get triggered around the holidays. And it's a kind of reality. And, it may be that some people think that, you're now either psychologically or spiritually involved and you would be beyond all of that. And my own sense is that actually as we get spiritually and psychologically involved, we, at least initially for a long time, become more sensitive about all of that. And our memories and our recollections become clearer and to some extent more poignant. We time travel. A part of us that's young comes to the fore in our present experience. The way the Buddhists would describe this in kind of semi-technical language is that there's a general emotional pattern from the past that's overriding seeing the specific individuals and the specific occasion that is actually occurring in the present. We are obscured. We're kind of living in the past. The coarsest instances of this are of course, when we kind of lose our minds a little bit and call somebody by a sister or a cousin or a father's or brother's name when we're talking, and we just realize we kind of associated this person to our brother or sister or mother or father. It happens. Where the past really, really overrides the present. And a lot of this is out of awareness, and it sometimes can create very, very strong reaction patterns. So it's interesting, I think if we were to talk to everyone in this room as to how they deal with things like this, many, many people, when this is occurring, want to kind of push it away. They want to push it out of awareness. They may wish to eradicate it. Make believe it's not happening. And my own experience is that it's not either easy or amazingly productive to do that. So we have our reaction patterns, and we often fight with ourselves, and we don't want to acknowledge that something's really stirring us up. But I think we can actually unite Buddhist wisdom and modern psychological wisdom and teachings on compassion, teachings on mindfulness, teaching on emotional intelligence, and suggests perhaps a little bit of a better approach. None of us is going to be free of time travel. A lot of our present is really inhabited by experiences of our past and by impressions from our past. It's just the case. I think it's really important that we not despise ourselves if that's occurring. We talk a lot about self-criticism and self-hatred and self sort of feelings of failure. And I don't think it's productive if we find ourselves going into a habitual pattern from the past to feel that we're a failure or there's something terrible about us. Au contraire, I think if we actually can become aware of that, we almost should be happy that we have a certain kind of mindfulness and we can be cognizant of the fact that we're both going through something emotionally, but at least part of us is emotionally aware that this is going on. And so can we have some small part of us that is mindful and aware and appreciative of that mindfulness and awareness? And that some part of us is being drawn into a stance that may not have very much to do with what's going on in our life today, and may be very, very little to do with what's going on with the person who is in front of us. But like a little tip of an iceberg, it could even be like the way somebody moves their eyebrow. Somehow triggered something in us that somebody did some long time ago. And that we may be in that interaction hoping for something or fearing something, and most of all getting a little bit stuck. And the counterintuitive thing to do, are you all aware of the old Chinese finger puzzle game we used to play where you put your fingers in the Chinese finger puzzle and the more you would try to get out of it, the tighter you were stuck. But the counterintuitive thing to do is to push your fingers in. And it's pretty much the same with these kind of experiences of time travel. The more you fight it, the more you want it to go away, the more you want to make believe it's not happening, the more it's going to clobber you. And the most productive thing I think most of us can do is, one, not become reactive to the time travel. Be aware of it. How is it affecting us physically? How is it affecting us emotionally? And if you need to, and if it's appropriate and you're with some other people and there's some reason why you might need to alert somebody to the fact that that's going on, you could just let somebody know, I'm having some kind of emotional reaction here. Perhaps I'm not optimally ready to have a long conversation about something. This is a lot easier to say than to do, but when we're really, really absorbed into Carl Gustav Jung, who was a psychoanalyst at the time of Freud, he would call this type of experience a complex. And it's a complex because all of a sudden you feel your body, your speech, your energy are really in a different kind of formation. Some people nowadays will call these just parts of ourselves. We've become a kind of childhood part. We feel very, very young. Maybe we feel like Superman and we want to stand on the table and fly. Or maybe we feel like we're a really frightened child and we want to get under the table and cower. And these are just feelings and reactions. Or we're walking around and we're quite competent and we're feeling, just as when my father said, can't you tie your shoes straight? Whatever your version of that was with a mother or father. And here I am, a competent individual, but feeling I can't tie my shoes straight. And sometimes, as I say, it might just be the way, the tone of voice somebody uses with us or the way they raise their eyebrow. within the Buddhist context, can we have compassion for ourselves when we get lost in time travel? Can we really, really just appreciate that this is a kind of human situation where something from the past is reemerging in the present? Can we use our own experience of this kind of time travel to have compassion on others who we also see getting absorbed in time travel? This happens all the time with people, and certainly with people we see. When we see somebody getting upset and we realize that there are some people who write in the psychological field that any time in a family relationship when things start really getting haywire, we can pretty much assume that some issue from our family of origin has gotten triggered. You know, if Anne comes late and I'm losing my mind, I mean, the fact that she's, let's say, 10 minutes late for something, the earth is not going to fall apart. But probably if I was hungry and my mother was 10 minutes late, it felt like the earth was going to fall apart. And again, here I am decades later and probably feeling pretty much like it felt when I was 4 months old, and probably looking like a 4-month-old when I start talking about her coming late. And it's not a pretty aspect in a way of who we are, but it's something that goes on in all relationships, pretty much as I see it, and at all ages. So it's an aspect that I think it really benefits from some awareness. It really can benefit from some compassion, and really seeing ourselves, as it were, manipulated by our own history. I think we can really, and the clearer we see the operation of that, and the more compassion we can have for that, the more easily we can develop really calm, considerate, compassionate concern for others when we see them going through it. So I would sum it up by saying that our spirituality comes not from transcending who we are, but appreciating our utter humanness. But since I talk quickly, we have a little time. If people have any comments or observations, I'd be happy to hear or share some more. It's a little bit of an interesting theme. I don't know if people have some thoughts, questions. Anything? Charlie?
Thank you, Harvey. Your comment at the beginning that these are examples of us experiencing different from the way things are.
Yeah.
Strikes me as one of the best concise explanations of Buddhism.
Okay. Hooray for fortune cookie Buddhism. Yeah, it's important. Yeah. It's a very interesting issue, that the core issue of Buddhism, and actually a lot of psychotherapy, is we are either emotionally or cognitively not really tuned into what actually is going on, but we are either because of perception or because of emotion experiencing things differently than they actually are.
Something happened even just before I left home today that was right along the lines of what you're talking about, that reminded me of something many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I left home angry.
In fact, what?
I left home angry.
Yeah, and I mean,
about something that wasn't really related to what was going on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, and we all experience that. And it's the source of an enormous amount of human conflict and pain and suffering. And so we all deserve compassion for ourselves and for our partners, our friends, our families. We all inadvertently step on each other's toes. And it's a bit nuclear and radioactive in the sense that we tend to find ourselves in complementary relationships with people whose, call them distortions or memories, kind of fit fist and glove with our memories and sore points. So it's just weird that way, or odd or interesting, but people tend to find themselves in relationships with others whose capacity to trigger painful memories are optimal. Welcome to love. That's the way the world works. Anybody else? Yeah. It's Sharon, isn't it? Yes.
Well, the ice cream cone.
Close to mouth.
Okay, this is kind of a different question. I went to a Buddhist retreat one time where they talked a bit about the fact that we're conditioned by and reactive to our ancestors. Our ancestors, more than just our own childhoods, but actually our ancestors' lives. I'm just curious if you had any thoughts on that. It was very interesting to me at the time, but I didn't quite get it.
Sounds like it would be more like a kind of Chinese kind of, to me it sounds like something would be said in a Chinese Buddhist context. It's not something that I heard a lot of in terms of in Theravada and even or in Tibetan Buddhism. Typically, in Theravada and in Tibetan Buddhism, the emphasis is there's talk about past lives and our past lives. There's certainly an appreciation of that. We've had ancestors, but I'm not familiar with that kind of presentation in general. Was it, in fact, a Chinese Buddhist situation?
It was in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah, so there's certainly a very heavy influence of Chinese Buddhism into Vietnam and Vietnamese culture. It's a Confucian culture historically, and that sense of lineage, actual blood lineage is very, very strong in that kind of world. Yeah.
You could say that the emotional message that comes through is rather similar, whether you're talking about reactivity engendered by ancestral lineage or in the, say, Indian-based, Tibetan-based, Tibetan traditions. A lot of emphasis, actually, as Harvey said, on past lives, meaning that everyone you meet is a former past relative. So it kind of comes through the same. And when Buddhism actually, historically, when Buddhism went to China, there was a conscious effort to kind of negotiate the cultural emphasis on ancestral connection and worship. And so that's a cultural story. But I think in the end, the emotional story is rather similar. We all have long histories going back to the Big Bang, really. They don't say that. But
Yeah, and then
so there's a lot that's in potential to be triggered. I think both images come to that same point, and psychology as well.
Yeah, and in Western psychological tradition, people would be certainly interested in certain ancestral patterns that might be influencing us, and that can be a kind of interesting thing to pursue. So it's interesting that it's even more maybe in the psychological tradition that you would see some interest in what went on with your ancestors and how is that affecting you today. Whereas in the Buddhist context, there's a really high emphasis on the continuum of the consciousness. So it's a helpful observation.
Great question, great conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're there. We'll take a minute or two break for allow anybody who's coming to come, and we'll start our meditation at 11.
And we'll pass the book around for names. Thanks. Yeah, there's a starting point. Oh, pen. I think this was the pen.